the bench guys over the years have always been very kind to me and given me some fascinating people to talk to. None more so than our guest this morning. Amos Wekesa, born into a smuggling family, raised in an orphanage, didn't go to school till the age of 10. I have something in common there because I didn't pay attention until the age of 10, so we have some similarities. He was then helped by the Salvation Army. Today, Amos is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Uganda and probably in East Africa. He's the founder and CEO of Great Lake Safaris and Uganda Lodges, and is one of the most successful tourism businesses in Uganda. So Amos, please come up and join me. The last 2 days, the Rwandan hosts have done an amazing job, but unashamedly for the next 25 minutes we're going to talk a little bit about Uganda. Amos, you have an amazing story. Some in the audience may have heard of it, but why don't you talk us through your personal journey?
I'm 44 years old, so if I started to take you through my personal journey, it would take another 44 years old. But I'm going to be very brief. And I'm fairly shy. I'm going to assume that you guys are not in the audience. In 1973, I was born in a family of about 6 people, 6 children. And it was in a village close to Ugandan border. The Kenyans here can identify with my name, Amos Wekesa. We're 6 million Bagisu. 4 million live in Kenya and 2 million live in Uganda. So I'm from those that live in Uganda. So we're the border. In 1973, Idi Amin had taken over power. Uganda was the #1 tourism destination in East Africa until 1971. Idi Amin takes over power. Life becomes extremely difficult. Sugar, tea, all the things were very rare in the country. So my family was basically involved in smuggling. But I think smugglers are like fishermen across the continent sometimes. They think that the water will always have the fish, so they always eat the small things that they get, every profit they get. I started smuggling, participating in the smuggling of sugar, tea at the age of 7 myself. At the age of 10, not going to school, Salvation Army came to look for top 2 poorest families to take 2 boys in my village. And thank God one of the top 2 poorest families was my family. And so in 1983, I'm 10 years old, they removed me from a village called Wakaka in Mbale to another town called Tororo. And I remember very well my first experience. We left the village very early in the morning. We walked about 20 kilometers, and we sat in a pickup, and it's my first time. And when I sat in the pickup and I started moving, I started seeing trees running. I had no idea, and I thought, all my life I've known the trees to be stationary, So I thought, okay. I thought it was a new experience for me. So we arrived at Tororo Children's Home. It was run by Salvation Army. We arrived in the evening. And for the first time I see, lights in the dormitory. So one young kid, about 5 years old, comes and touches the wall, and the light goes off. And I wait for the guy to move out. I also touch the wall, and light goes off, and I get so scared, of course. I run away just in case they discover the problem behind that. Anyway, so at the age of 10, they take me to a nursery school. I still tell my son who's 12, I was in nursery school at the age of 10. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't get it. So I did very well from my primary school, but I went to secondary school, it's called senior one, at the age of 17. And at the age of 17, my hormones were active. Of course, I liked sports, I liked acting, I liked leadership. So I didn't perform well. So 96, I have failed my A-levels. And I remember May 1996. I'm 23 years old. I'm not allowed to be in the home. I can't go back to the village, whose life I understood very well. I mean, it was so poor that if my mother visited, we used to use her gomes, a big cloth that we used to cover ourselves. And so if she stayed away, we had nothing to cover ourselves. At the time, the house was grass thatched, and if it rained, we all sat in one corner, and that was my lives. And I knew I didn't want to go back to that life. And so, 96, I remember, I'm a Christian, so I remember praying to God. I said, God, I got an opportunity to go to school, but I I didn't use it right. So I said, if you give me another second chance, I am going to work so hard. And a Canadian guy comes home, who was one of the guys that helped the home, who was a doctor in the nearby hospital, and just tells my guardian, take that guy to go and do a certificate in tourism in Kampala. And that's how I ended up, because no institution could take me. I ended up in Kampala, and then I did my certificate for nine months. After 9 months, I was done with Salvation Army, so I started looking out for my first job. My first job, I was a sweeper. I was earning close to about $10 a month. And I worked as a sweeper for 1 year. Then I got my second job as an office messenger. So I was going to the post office and doing stuff. It was on a tour company. And as I was doing the things, of course, I was observing, I was seeing. And then my third job, I became a tour guide with a company called Gorilla Tours. My boss paid me $1 a day I worked. But I think it's the job that I got the most experience. I was a tour guide, and I was guiding camping safaris. And you'd have 15 guys. The first day they arrive the country, they're all friends. The next 3 days, they start dividing themselves on who is tall, who is short, who is richer. And so you have to deal with the politics of the tourism. I started learning how tourism works. And everybody wants you to be his friend. And I could sit at the campfire until the last guy stops smoking at about 3 a.m. I wake up in the morning, make breakfast for them. And after traveling 12 hours, I would put up tents. I would make breakfast for them. I remember one time I got so exhausted. I fell in the fire, and I was pulled out of the fire by one of the tourists. But even then, through that pain, I remember that it's one of my best times. And sometimes I would guide, and people would say, after every trip, every client was happy. And I think that something that just touched my heart was every time they left the country, they thought, Amos, people would say we've traveled the world, but we've not seen incredible beauty like Ugandan beauty. I kept thinking, why do I look at my country in the wrong way? Can't I be positive about it? It's just like, I'm married, and if I wake up every morning and I'm thinking negatively about my wife, and things can't work. So I have to wake up every morning assuring my wife she's the best woman in the world, So I started assuring myself Uganda is the best country in the world. And so my last job was a desk guy. I would go and sit in a tour company, and clients would come in, and I would easily make 9 out of 10 sales. I started discovering myself, and I was earning $35 a month. And so I resigned from my job 2001, 23rd April, that's after my 28th birthday. And I started a briefcase company called Great Lake Safaris. Worked, it's a long story. And then, of course, I appeared in Washington Times. The first trip was by a lady from World Bank in January 2002. This international trip. At the beginning, I just did car hires. I went to do weddings and this kind of stuff. So 2002, this lady comes from the World Bank, and so we take her to Queen Elizabeth National Park and make sure she's enjoyed her trip. She said, this is the most beautiful trip I've had in life. I said, when I go back to the US, I'm definitely going to do something. I thought, someone who just thinks has to help Africans. She went. In May, she recommended another group that came to do research on malaria, and one of the guys in the group, I didn't know, was an editor with the Washington Times. So the guy goes to the US, enjoys this trip, and says, Amos, I couldn't take them to my office because I had a below staircase office. And this guy was very tall. So I went and met him at Sheraton just to debrief. At the beginning of the trip, at the beginning of the business, I made sure I had dinner with every client to just find out how they enjoy the trip, and I also shared my vision, where we want to go, and really I started learning something from that. So they go back in May 2002, and so in January 2002, I have saved up, which is about $2,000, I put towards a car. So in end of January, I go to Holland. And I'm in Holland, they tell me the car that you left behind, not insured, was given to a guy who got drunk and smashed it. And I came back with a debt of $3,000. And man, everyone around me was telling me, we told you you're poor, you could not do anything with your life. As a young man at that time, I thought, these guys were so harsh. But as I grew, I started realizing that people tell you certain things because of their personal fears, their personal insecurities. Today, I handle criticism much more better than I did many years ago. So anyway, I come back, I tell the guy, there are 2 options for you. One, you allow me work so hard, the guy of the car, the guy that bought the car, I deposited $3,000, the car was $6,000. I deposited $3,000, so I needed to pay $3,000. I had nothing. I went to the guy, I said, the car I got from you is smashed. There are two options. You either take me to prison and get nothing, or two, allow me work. Every month I'll pay you. So I worked every month. Everything I got, I gave to this guy. 7, 8 months down the line, I finished paying. In October, I actually contemplated closing business. Life became so hard because I'm so drained. I've taken up a small office. I've taken up, pay the bills. I have a telephone costs and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I contemplated closing, but something in me just tells me, Amos, hang in there. On 22nd November, I get a phone call from the US. Hi, Amos. My name is Tom Carter. How can I help you? He says, no, I traveled with you in May. I enjoyed my trip. I know you didn't know who I was. I am an editor with the Washington Times. I think he had written 4 spreads of his experience in Uganda. People started coming. Amos, we read about your business. That article is still on my website up today. So first group came, second group came, and every group, I bought first car, second car. But I had gone through poverty so much, and I hated poverty. I still hate it. I made sure I didn't live my slum life. I was paying about $3 for it. I was selling the slum. Even when I get money to buy some cars and so on for the company, I did not have a car. I did not have a personal car until 2005. But at that time, I started investing in business cars. I got 1, 2. I reached about 10. Then I went into property. I started buying cheap property. My landlady and landlord were very nice people. I went to their building, and when I went to their building, I influenced about 40% of their tenants. So they loved me. They just, they gave me a big office, almost at low cost, but they also encouraged me to do investments, long-term investments. Told me, Amos, you are young. Can you start investing 40 kilometers around Kampala? Don't invest in the city because you won't manage. So I started buying land. Bought land, I think every 6 months, 3 months, I bought land for like 10, 15 years, 10 years, about that time. And it's amazing. At that time, you would go 40 kilometers across, just outside Kampala, and you'd buy land at $300 an acre. So I started buying lots of those land. Today, what I bought, 3,000 acres, $3,000 an acre, a lot of it goes maybe 80,000 an acre, or there's one I bought $20,000 about 13 years ago near the airport. And the next, I have quite a number of plots. So I was offered one of the plots, $1.3 million, and I thought, what? From $20,000 to this? So anyway, after some time, 2006, I became the first, they advertised for concession in a national park. And I was the first Ugandan to apply. And so I applied, and I remember very well the guy who was the head of Uganda Wildlife Authority. He refused to. I won. I got $5,000. I gave to a guy to write the proposal. So we won, and I was the only guy who is Ugandan competing. So I won by $2 difference in the financial stuff. This guy said, "No Ugandan should come here wanting to invest." My fellow Ugandan. That was January 2006. I tell you, I told the guy, I am going to sue you. I started mobilizing against the guy. Because when it's your territory, you must fight. So I told the guy, I'm going to take you on. I got another guy who told me, there's no Ugandan who has a lodge in a national park. This guy must be given an opportunity. So in December 12th December 2006, he gives me the concession and says, he's going to fail, but the second guy should be on standby because this one definitely not going to manage. But my life, this is my third time in the year to put on a suit. And I put on jeans, and that's my style. And in Uganda, dressing is very important. You're judged by the way you dress until you prove yourself. Now, I do with the lodge, I do the environmental impact assessment until April. I start constructing my first lodge, private lodge. I started in April. By 15th of August, the tented camp was up, and I was charging $250. That tented camp, I invested about $250,000 in 1 year. I got back my investment. So I built my second lodge in Queen Elizabeth National Park, which was budget at that time, called Simba Safari Camp. Then the two again got me another one. I have a concession, which is about 830 square kilometers Budongo Forest is about 900 individual chimpanzees, over 80 different species of primates. So I have a concession for 50 years. Now, the reason I also applied for this, I also knew I was going to face resistance. I apply. These guys had made $20,000 from the forest, National Forest Authority, from a forest with chimpanzees, the biggest mahogany trees in the region, big forest, and had made $20,000 in 3 years. So I tell them I'm going to give you more business. The first year I took over the concession, I gave them $200,000. Now I'm going towards $500,000 a year from the amount of money that I'm giving them. And that was a whole thing. Then that's how the whole Great Lake Safari thing. Great Lake Safari right now is one of the top 3 safari companies in Uganda. We have an office here in Rwanda. We're also going to Tanzania. We are building our 4th lodge, which is Great Plains, and that's the story.
I mean, an incredible story, and I wrote 10 questions down knowing I would only get time to answer 2 because he's just such an amazing orator. But I think one of the things that I think for everybody in this room, I think when we look at what you've achieved and what many people would love to try and achieve in Africa, I think particularly in Uganda, in Kenya, in Rwanda, is how do we balance the growth of tourism with conservation? You've been a guide, so you understand the natural habitat, how important it is to protect it. How do we grow tourism so that it doesn't damage, that it can protect conservation?
Yeah, there's been a lot of fight between conservationists and business people like myself. And it's been a very tough finding a balance. Now, for Uganda, we have 10 national parks, 12 game reserves, maybe another 10 sanctuaries. And for you guys in the audience who want to invest, Uganda has no rooms. I can tell you. In 10 national parks, 12 game reserves combined, you have less than 1,500 rooms right now. And last week we had a big meeting where my Ugandan brother here attended with Space for Giants. There are about a number of concessions that have come up, investing in the national parks, but also taking on private conservancies within the country, because right now the leadership is willing to do that. And then there were the challenge with politics as well. Now, democracy in Africa is a very challenging stuff, because I still believe that democracy can only work in an environment where there's a lot of knowledge, where people are educated. And so what happens is the communities intend to go and, either poach, the communities go to cut down the trees as a means of survival. And then when the leaders come in to talk about it, they are threatened to be elected out of politics. But then you have conservation groups who are just thinking, we must protect this forest. But you cannot protect a forest out of emotions. So the guys, you must balance. For example, Budongo Forest. The park that we are running right now probably has the most conserved mahogany trees in the region, all the biggest mahogany trees in East Africa. But the reason is that we run a lodge called Budongo Ecology Net. All the linen is washed by the community, the women from the community. The supply of food is done by the community. The rangers in the forest is done by the community. Now, I also told the guys who are doing the protection of the forest, I knew that National Forest Authority didn't have the capacity to pay these guys on time. And actually, as I speak, I think the guys that pay our employees, the guys working with us as rangers in the forest, are the ones who are paid promptly. So I said, I'm going to take on the group that looks after the whole general forest, and I'll pay them as well on my proceeds. Now, with that, they're able to see that, one, National Forest Authority is able to get quite some money from us. Actually, they're giving me another part of the forest because of the good results after proving myself. Now, with that, they're able to see, the community is able to see alternative livelihoods. We have started up a beekeeping project, for example, at the boundary of the park, which helps with elephants and so on. And so our dream is to make sure that the community with Great Lake Safaris can be able to have a honey packaging place, and it's starting to work very well. The community can see that their foods are being bought. But the good example is that guys that used to plant maize on 1 acre of land used to earn about $30 from that acre. Today they plant high-value crops. They plant watermelons, cucumbers. And from a space this size, they're able to make far much more money from the the 1 acre that they used to do. And so people are starting to understand that way. And the only way we can conserve is when the people, the custodians of the forest, custodians of the protected areas, are the guys that surround the parks. And it's about us, the business people, working together with them to make sure that they see alternative livelihood.
And if you think about how that then impacts on the sort of the natural wildlife, you look at cities like Nairobi, the way it's grown around Nairobi National Park. If you look at, I mean, the last 2 or 3 years, the ivory poaching industry has boomed, and there's been enormous global condemnation and a lot of control to try and diminish that and bring it into control. Do you think our grandchildren and their children will still be able to see elephants, rhino in the wilderness?
Yes, it's a big challenge because, especially for countries like Uganda, where the population is too young. 36% of our population is 9 years and below. 56% of our population is 18 years and below. 70% of our population is 30 years and below. It's probably averagely the youngest population in the world. Our growth per year is at 3.5%, which is 1 million people added to our population every single year. So that creates pressure for these protected areas. But slowly we're trying to, as people come in to invest, and people start seeing alternative livelihood, we're getting more voices of people saying, guys, I think it's time for us to think about the protection of this world. Uganda has not been left out in the area of smuggling of ivory and this kind of stuff. But as I talk right now, there is a bit of interest. There's a lot of interest growing. And I can also say one of the reasons why Uganda's tourism did not take off was, from 1971 for about 20 years, tourism and insecurity cannot coexist. And we had a problem of leadership where the leadership came from farming, and so they wanted to do things that they used to. Tourism was not a subject they understood. If you Google my name, you see I've been at the forefront of negotiating, pushing leadership. I'm right now the chairman of Presidential Investors Roundtable on Tourism. My role is just to pursue the knowledge on tourism. As I speak, the leaders, even the president of Uganda, has now agreed that tourism must be taken as number one. And because of that, last year they hired 3 PR farms. We last had 3 PR farms. We last had PR farms in 1971. Just 1 year of PR farms in 3 markets, the UK, Germany, and the US. And just showcasing the beauty of seeing this afternoon, or this afternoon here, has brought in a lot of opportunities. I can tell you that, like Primate Lodge, we're getting bookings for 2019, but we need more rooms, it really the bottom line. But we also need responsible investors in the country as I speak.
Good. Now listen, I think everybody's been exposed to that, and for us it's critical. We're running out of time, but one final question, and we could sit here for 2 hours easily, is given your story and where the amazing journey you've had, amazing safari you've had, and where you are today, what would you say to a 10-year-old Amos today? If you were advising him, what would you say to him?
I would tell them their dream is valid. I think that is key, and because of that, I have taken up time. I sponsor quite a number of kids through school. When I first started out, because Salvation Army, I first paid for 10 kids who were not from my bloodline, because the people who paid my school fees were not from my bloodline. So I finished, I think the last one is just finishing university this year. But then I took over other many kids to pay school fees for. But one of the things I tell them, that it doesn't matter who you are. All you have to do is, be determined, make sure that you achieve day by day, take small steps, don't be in a hurry, but also be honest, make sure that people can trust you. In tourism, we 100% survive on trust. And if you don't have trust, you have failed. And I try to be an example, so I do programs as well. I have a radio program that young people listen to. I give inspirational talks to young people across the country all the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, a true inspiration. I'm sure you'll agree. Please thank Amos. Thank you.